KTCU FM Fort Worth. You've made it to the end of another long work week. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a few guys talking sports for the next hour. This is Friday Night Sports. Here's Ben Otten, James Flowers, and Mitchell LaFave.
What's up, guys? I'm Ben Otten, and alongside me are James Flowers and Mitchell LaFave. And again, before we start the show tonight, we're still looking for suggestions for the name of the show. If y'all have any ideas, please let us know. You can find us on Facebook. The page name right now is Friday Night Sports, or you can find us on Twitter at FRI Night Sports. Now, let's get into some big news. College football is finally officially back. I know we've all been waiting for that. It's been a long summer without college football. There were a few games last Saturday, but this is truly week one. We'll definitely get into more of that and look all around the world of college football and dive into the TCU Jackson State game that is tomorrow night. But first, let's start in the NBA with this unending saga, this Kyrie Irving, Isaiah Thomas trade. It's finally been finalized. The final deal is Boston will get Kyrie Irving. In return, the Cleveland Cavaliers get Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Ante Zizic, the 2018 first-round pick, which belonged to Brooklyn's and will be determined. That spot of the pick will be determined by Brooklyn's record this year, and the 2020 second-round pick, which belonged to Boston. Guys, what are your thoughts? Was it worth the wait for Cleveland to stall in this trade, knowing that Kyrie Irving wants out, and if this trade didn't go through, he might still be on the roster?
Well, I think this pick makes perfect sense for Cleveland. They wanted a blue-chip prospect, someone with upside and can carry the reins if LeBron does end up leaving after this season. But they also wanted a veteran who could help LeBron now. And they got exactly what they were looking for with that trade with Boston. Ante Zizic, the blue-chip prospect they were looking for. Isaiah Thomas, the veteran who can take some pressure off of LeBron James. And we'll see about this next pick and, of course, this 2020 pick. So I think the Cavs really are the big winner for the future and now.
Yeah, like I was thinking last week. I mean, even if the trade had gone through like it was, still believe the Cavs are the winners with that deal, getting a couple good prospects plus the draft pick, and then now adding a draft pick, even though it is a couple years down the road, still just overall win for the Cavs.
Yeah, and Isaiah Thomas isn't that much of a downgrade in the point guard position from Kyrie Irving. I mean, obviously Kyrie's got the clutch genes and definitely has much more of an upside, but Isaiah Thomas has shown that he's capable to be an all-star point guard, which will definitely help LeBron James along with the rest of that, which I think James mentioned is a good point because Cleveland's definitely, I think they're looking towards the future. Now they understand Kyrie wants out. They may think LeBron's leaving, and these picks and this trade is definitely a part of helping them in the future. The reason why this trade was delayed was because of the Cavs had concern about Isaiah Thomas' lingering hip injury. He says he'll be 100% ready to go and it won't hold him back at all. But obviously, something from the Cleveland medical staff alarmed them, and you can't blame the Cavs for being hesitant. This is a blockbuster trade in the NBA, and you want to make sure you get everything right and not make any mistakes. So it's finally been finalized. Isaiah Thomas will join the King, LeBron James, and in the Eastern Conference in Cleveland, and Boston gets Kyrie Irving to add to Gordon Hayward, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford. It's going to be a loaded Boston team. They'll look to stop LeBron James from getting to his 9th consecutive NBA Finals this winter. Moving on, let's move on to some MLB. The big news in Major League Baseball right now is, oddly enough, out of Philadelphia. They have the worst record in baseball, but not because of Rhys Hoskins. This rookie is hitting .303 with 11 home runs and 25 RBIs through his first 21 games. He's the fastest player in MLB history to reach 11 home runs. Guys, is he the real deal? Can he lead this Phillies team in this rebuilding process that they've been going on for a couple years now?
Well, it's another rookie call-up that has gone well for teams. We saw Aaron Judge, obviously, earlier this year, had a great first half of the season. Cody Bellinger has been mashing. Paul DeJong for the Cardinals. Bradley Zimmer, among others. It's just added to the list. And Rhys Hoskins, his minor league baseball numbers were not outstanding. 284 average, 114 hits, half of those for extra bases, including 29 home runs. On Wednesday, he was named International League MVP and Rookie of the Year, the first Lehigh Valley Iron Pig to win either award, and the first international leaguer to win both awards since Steven Souza Jr. in 2014. He's with the Rays. So he's played very well in left field while in Philadelphia. even starting a triple play last week against the Cubs, kind of a fluke kind of deal. But when Odubel Herrera and Aaron Alter, when they come back, he'll get more reps at first base, where the Phillies see him playing most in the future.
Yeah, and the Phillies, they've got a bright future ahead of them, especially with Rhys Hoskins performing like he has right now. Nick Williams, who's been hitting .281 since he's been called up. Their catcher, George Alfaro, is hitting .356 in his first couple games up in the bigs. Plus, they've got still a numerous amount of prospects in the minors who, I mean, obviously they're prospects. You don't know how they're going to perform when they come up, but definitely a bright future.
Yeah, no. When Hoskins started hitting the way he was, it reminded me instantly of Michael Franco for the Phillies, their third baseman, who came up last year and burst onto the scene as a rookie with 25 home runs. He struggled a lot this year. So for me, it's all about next year for Rhys Hoskins. Right now, there's no pressure for him to perform, but he's shown the MLB. He's shown the MLB that he can hit with the best of them. So he's gonna have. He's going to have pitchers keeping an eye on him in the future. And next season with Philadelphia, I mean, they have the worst record in baseball right now, so there's no pressure, like I said. But next season, it's a brand new, it's a clean slate for the Phillies, and I think they'll be looking to improve, and possibly push for a wild card or even an NL East title next season. That will be when we'll see just how good Rhys Hoskins is.
And before you move on, I think the big question for the Phillies here is, what are they going to do with Tommy Joseph? Joseph was acquired from the Giants in 2012, which is actually a really cool story in itself, how he was acquired by Philadelphia. But he's been in the majors since last season. He's got a .247 average. He's got some power, 40 home runs over 2 seasons, but he really hasn't hit consistently like the Phillies hoped for. And if they want to make room for Hoskins, which we all know they do, Tommy Joseph might need to find a new home next year.
Not a bad problem to have, though, certainly for the Phillies at first base. We'll stay in the NL East for the next topic, talk about a team that's also struggling, the New York Mets. Yoenis Cespedes and David Wright are done for the season, and Michael Conforto, arguably their best player this season, looks like he's out for the season. It's been a struggle all year for the Mets. Is it just injuries, guys? Do they have that good of a roster, and it's just been too many injuries for them to keep up with? Or are there more problems than that in New York?
I mean, they definitely have a high caliber roster. Noah Syndergaard, Jacob deGrom, Steven Matz, who's struggled a bit this year, but they've got a lot of guys who can do some damage. Ahmed Rosario, who came up, he's been hitting all right. Cespedes in the outfield, but they've also been dealing away guys. I guess at this point, just trying to build for the future.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned, you alluded to the trades. They received 6 players in exchange for trading 4 very solid players away. Addison Reed was traded to Boston, Lucas Duda to Tampa Bay, Curtis Granderson to LA, and Jay Bruce to Cleveland. But in those trades, the guys they got have actually been playing fairly well, most of them. Drew Smith was acquired from Tampa Bay in the Duda trade, currently at AA Binghamton. And since the trade, he's pitched in 7 games for the Rumble Ponies and has a 3-1 record. In 9 innings pitched, he's given up 4 hits while walking 2 and striking out 10 with an earned run average of 1. A.J. Ramos was acquired in exchange for 2 minor leaguers from the Miami Marlins. Has 2 saves with a 4.5 ERA. Really has not quite pitched like what they expected, but they're really not in contention for anything. So they just want to see what he's got and kind of look at him towards the future. Jamie Callahan, acquired from the Red Sox for Addison Reed, currently in AAA Las Vegas. In 7 games since the trade, he's 1-1 with 1 save and posted a 2.25 ERA. So really for the Mets right now, they trade away guys who have made an impact up to now, but they need to start looking to the future, because if they don't, they're going to be stuck in this rut. And I think their future looks really bright with a lot of minor leaguers coming up.
Yeah, for me, it's almost the opposite. I'm a little worried that they've done too much selling for a team that isn't really in a seller's position. I mean, they've just been hampered by injuries all season. You can't really plan for that. But most of those guys will be back for next season. I just don't know about the Granderson trade, Lucas Duda trade, Jay Bruce, Addison Reed, those veterans that you have on your roster that you're trading for young guys. This team is almost ready to win now, you would think. So it was a little surprising to see them just offload all those veterans. Obviously, there's no guarantee that those veterans we're gonna step up and play as well next season, and maybe these rookies that they've gotten, they've obviously gotten off to good starts, so maybe they can come up and help the Mets next season. But I was just a little bit surprised to see that, because I think especially with their rotation with DeGrom and Syndergaard and Steven Matz, they're ready to win now. I was just a little surprised to see them offload so many key players.
Well, I think we could kind of look at it as a New York Yankees situation from last year, where they might be able to get a couple of these guys back. It kind of depends if they want to get re-signed or not. So we saw Aroldis Chapman go to Chicago. Adam Warren also went to Chicago, I believe. So, and now they are both back in New York. Chapman, of course, having his own issues, but that's a whole different topic. So I think it's a really interesting thing. We'll see where the Mets go with this. But right now it just seems like that they are going in the direction of, hey, let's build up now, call these guys up in 3, 4, maybe even next year, who knows, and see how they do.
And on that note, we're going to stay in the NL East, which has been the theme of this MLB segment, I guess, and talk about the Miami Marlins, because the MLB home run leader, Giancarlo Stanton, is a possible trade piece in either in this upcoming offseason with the Texas Rangers, Philadelphia Phillies, St. Louis Cardinals, and San Francisco Giants, looking the likely favorites if the Marlins decide to put Giancarlo on the trade block. Guys, should Miami trade him? And if so, where's his best fit?
Well, as you said, you listed those 4 teams. There's a few different good fits. One, as you mentioned, the Philadelphia Phillies. Imagine a 1-2 punch of Giancarlo Stanton and Rhys Hoskins, leading to a resurgence in the Phillies like we saw in the late 2000s. Pedro Florman, formerly a shortstop, made the transition to outfield as he's in center. His .342 average has been welcomed by all in the Phillies system. However, he will expect more money next year if the Phillies want to re-sign him. Mitch talked about Nick Williams earlier. He's impressed the Philly staff as well. He could move to left field, which would allow Stanton to stay in right. The bottom line is, for any of these teams, though, the team that will get him will have to afford his monster contract. Next year will be his 4th year in his 13-year, $325 million contract, in which he makes an average $25 million a year. I just don't know if any of these teams can really afford that.
And you mentioned if he does end up going to the Phillies, I know there's been talks. A lot of people in Philadelphia, they want Mike Trout to be able to go back home. He's from that area. If they pick up Stanton, definitely would not be able to go for that. But at the same time, Stanton's killing the game right now. So,
yeah, his numbers, this is arguably his best baseball that he's played in his career. His .292 batting average is the best of his career so far, and with less than a month to play, he has nearly doubled the number of home runs he hit last year at 51. He hit 27 last year. And Stanton is 14 hits shy of reaching his career high of hits. So, and he's cut down the number of strikeouts, which is very important. But when Ben mentioned the teams that were interested, the one that really baffles me a little bit is the St. Louis Cardinals. The main power hitter they have in the outfield is Randall Grichuk, but he's underwhelmed since arriving in St. Louis, making stints in AAA Memphis the past 3 years. They have depth in the outfield. Tommy Pham is having a breakout season. Jose Martinez has showed that he can put the ball over the fence, and they just signed Stephen Piscotty to a 6-year extension. I honestly don't see how they could afford it, and I really don't think they need him.
Are y'all both in agreement that Miami should get rid of Giancarlo Stanton and not hold on to him?
I don't know if they should necessarily get rid of him. They've got a half-decent team. Marcell Ozuna's having a fantastic year. 31 home runs, 101 RBIs. Justin Bour, another great year for him. Christian Yelich hitting well. JT Realmuto hitting well at the catching position. There's just a lot of different guys who could start to make things happen. Just depends on if Stanton wants to stay for the next couple seasons.
And they've got a pretty young team. Looking at it, you just mentioned Christian Yelich and Marcell Ozuna and Justin Bour, who, if he had actually been healthy for the rest of the season, he was also mashing. Wouldn't say he'd hit 60 home runs like Stanton possibly could, but he was still a very good addition to the team. And I don't know what they have in their farm system, to be perfectly honest with you, but they got to get some solid pitching support. Obviously, the loss of Jose Fernandez was hurt. That really hurt them and did not help them out in any way. But we really want to see where this new ownership with Derek Jeter wants to take the team. Where Where does he see them going in 5-10 years? And is Giancarlo Stanton a part of that picture or not?
Yeah, I think you made a good point talking about Jose Fernandez. Kind of just dealt a bad hand in that situation. Not really anything you can plan for. He was kind of the centerpiece of that franchise if it's not Giancarlo Stanton. And with his passing, you can't plan for that. It's not like he got traded and they got something in return or something like that. But I do think I agree with Mitch. This is a good lineup. Their pitching has struggled at times, but you have to think they're going to get better. And they have a really veteran bullpen. And most importantly, I think Miami owes it to that fan base to go for it next year. This is a franchise that hasn't been very competitive and even attempting to make a run at a playoff run at all in the past couple of years, and I think they owe it to that fan base to go for it. And if you trade Giancarlo Stanton for some young guys or even some okay pieces, you're kind of just saying we're still rebuilding, and they've been rebuilding for long enough.
And to be fair to Giancarlo Stanton, he's pretty much single-handedly put this team in a wild card position. Given the NL wild card race isn't the most exciting like the American League, but I mean he has just mashed his way to nearly the third wild card spot behind Colorado and Arizona.
All right, on that note, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk some NFL preseason. The Cleveland Browns are 3-0. How about that? Is that a big deal, or is it just because it's preseason? We'll talk about that and a lot more right after this.
Nothing seems to bring joy quite like the happiness in a child's eye or the smile on their face. Unfortunately, that happiness is not seen in some children, especially those who are the victims of neglect or abuse. And that's where Family Compass comes in. The mission of Family Compass is to build healthy families in a strong Dallas community by preventing child abuse and neglect. They use home mentoring and educational outreach programs to equip and empower parents to raise healthy and productive children. Since being founded in 1992, Family Compass has served nearly 40,000 children and parents by strengthening their families' emotional, economical, physical, and social capacities. To find out more information or ways to donate, visit family.compass.org. And if you suspect any child is being neglected or abused, please call and report it. 1-800-252-5400. That's 1-800-252-5400. This message brought to you by Family Compass of Dallas and your friends here at KTCU.
Welcome back to Friday Night Sports. As I said before the break, the Cleveland Browns, who went 1-15 last season, are off to a perfect 3-0 start in the preseason, led by rookie quarterback Deshaun Kaiser. Guys, are the Cleveland Browns set for a decent season? You think could they reach the 500 mark this year, or are we overlooking 3 preseason games that don't mean anything?
I definitely think that yes, they are 3-0 in preseason, and they've got some good prospects coming up. Maybe they'll reach 500, maybe not. It's hard to say. Again, it is just preseason. I know a few years ago the Detroit Lions went 4-0 in preseason, then went 0-16 in the regular season. But yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to judge a season based off the preseason.
Yeah, take it for what it is. It's preseason. We always kind of joke about it. But there have been some bright spots for the Browns in their first 3 preseason games. The defense is one of those bright spots. They've allowed just 2 touchdowns in their first 3 games. None of the Browns' preseason opponents have found the end zone in the first half. What was a little surprising was the Browns cut 2-time Pro Bowler Joe Hayden on Wednesday, but he was quickly picked up by the Steelers. And I say it was a bit surprising for him to get cut, but he's really been consistently injured and inconsistent on the field. They also lost Tank Carter to season-ending injury in the preseason, so the defense is looking good in the preseason. I don't know if that could carry over to the regular season, but that's one bright spot for the Browns.
There is one thing to mention, kind of a somewhat breaking story. I mean, apparently Jermaine Kearse from the Seahawks, it could be a trade target for the Browns if they get him. How do you guys think that could impact their season?
Well, it's another target for Deshaun Kaiser, that's for sure. And speaking of Kaiser, he's played well against Tampa Bay. The Bucs didn't start many of their starters, but it's still encouraging to see Kaiser play well for Browns fans. I didn't watch the game, but those who did said he looked very comfortable, especially on third downs, completing 3 of 4 third down passes in the first quarter, and on the 3rd and 6th play, audibled at the line of scrimmage. Corey Coleman has been a big target for Kaiser this preseason. He's looked very strong, particularly along the sidelines. So I think if you throw Jermaine Curtis into the picture there, him and Corey Coleman could be a very tough 1-2 tandem for Deshaun Kaiser.
Yeah, I think this defense is legit, James. You mentioned they haven't given up a touchdown in the first half of the preseason so far, and that's important because that's usually when the starters play, and I think you give a lot of credit to the Browns for that. Myles Garrett and Jabril Peppers are going to be really good players. They're both going to have solid rookie seasons, I think. You add in Emmanuel Ogbah, who's in his second year from Oklahoma State, linebacker Jamie Collins, and you mentioned the cutting of when they cut Joe Hayden, their corner. It's because they have Jamar Taylor on one side, who's an all-pro corner, and they just signed Calvin Pryor from the Jets, who's very good as well. You could put Jabril Peppers in that category as well. He's kind of a linebacker safety hybrid. There's enough depth at that position. I think Joe Hayden's contract was just way too much considering how inconsistent he's been able to play. But I think that offense will struggle. I worry about Kaiser. He's still a rookie and doesn't have the greatest targets around him. Duke Johnson beside him is very unproven. He's never looked that good. Cleveland will be better than 1-15, but I don't think that a 3-0 record in the preseason is reflective of their regular season.
I would also look for Matthew Days, a bit of a sleeper for the Browns. He was the 30th running back selected in the draft out of NC State, so he's a rookie, and he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He rushed the ball just 3 times for 13 yards against Tampa Bay, led the team in receptions against the Giants on August 21st. All signs point to Days making the team his third-string running back, but he's really a guy that is good out in the flat, can catch the ball, and make some plays. So, yeah, the offense is not the most prolific offense in the NFL. However, you can't really go much further down than last year.
All right, let's move on to from the team with the worst record in the regular season last year to the reigning Super Bowl champions, the New England Patriots. On the flip side, they're just 1-2 this preseason. They lost Julian Edelman to a torn ACL on Saturday. How big of a loss is this for Tom Brady and co.?
Well, this will yet be another challenge that the Patriots will be forced to overcome. But if any team were to lose their star receiver and still be the Super Bowl favorite, it would be the New England Patriots. Because Edelman was a bit of a two-way player, meaning that he could catch the ball and was versatile in the field, but could also block when he needed to, he's going to be hard to replace. I mean, no question about it. Chris Hogan will be forced to take on a bigger role, which I think he can do after his late season performances last year. And Brandon Cooks was used to being the number one receiver in New Orleans, so he should fit right into this New England system. And Danny Amendola, cannot forget about him. He's always a threat as well.
Yeah, you mentioned it, Brandon Cooks, Chris Hogan, and Danny Amendola. I feel pretty much in New England, with Tom Brady at the helm, almost any wide receiver could be a good wide receiver.
Yeah, you make a good point. It doesn't really. I think Brady could have us three out there and still probably throw for about 3,000 yards and get to a Super Bowl. He's just that good of a quarterback and that great of a leader and a competitor. James mentioned that Brandon Cooks trade. It's now a huge plus for New England, and what a steal for the Patriots. They got a 4th-round pick and Brandon Cooks, who was Drew Brees' number 1 in New Orleans last year. And in return, the Saints get a 1st-round pick, which was number 32 overall last season because the Patriots won the Super Bowl, and a 3rd-round pick. So so having a guy like Brandon Cooks out there, obviously a lot of eyes will be on him as a defense because without Julian Edelman on the other side, but he's still an outstanding receiver, and you add in guys like Chris Hogan and Danny Amendola, I think this Patriots team will be fine as long as their defense continues to play like it did last year.
And what's always kind of fun about watching the Patriots, I know they could be the most hated team in the NFL. I don't really know the stats on that, but they always find someone new that's going to make a name for themselves. So Julian Edelman is one, Amendola for that matter, and really Chris Hogan was the breakout last year. So I'm sure Brady will find someone to help really promote their status and make a big name for themselves, because that's just what the Patriots do. It's a bit of a system, and it works.
Yeah, well, Wes Welker obviously comes to my mind pretty much instantly. Just one of those guys that can kind of not, completely fill the void left by Edelman, but certainly help that void. And like we said, with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, that offense is going to be fine. I think the defense is I think the defense isn't a concern, but it'll be more of a focal point.
Yeah.
And let's move on to the NFC South. Talk about a little bit of the division race. This should be a really fun race to watch between these 4 teams in the NFC South. Atlanta is your reigning NFC champions and just a couple minutes away from being a Super Bowl champion. New Orleans adds Adrian Peterson. They've still got Drew Brees back there. That offense is going to be explosive. Carolina went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and Cam Newton's an MVP. He struggled last season, but looks set for a bounce back season with a lot of additional targets around him to help him out. And Tampa Bay, a team that hasn't been talked about in the NFC South a lot, is on the rise. That defense is really good, and people are saying Jameis Winston's a dark horse for MVP. Guys, what are your thoughts on the NFC South?
Well, it really is a bit of a division that's up for grabs, as you kind of alluded to. The Buccaneers have been close. They've been getting there over the past few years. You mentioned Jameis Winston now in year 3 under center. Feeling more comfortable as really the face of this team in a sense and really is the leader of the offense. And he gets Deshaun Jackson and rookie tight end O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard has been a bit of a letdown this preseason. However, transitioning from college, especially at Alabama, to the NFL where he's really expected to do a lot more, it's going to take some time. As for the Atlanta Falcons, same team. We could say they should be Super Bowl champions. That's a whole different debate. However, they could very easily run the table in the NFC South, but I don't think it's completely run away from them with an on-the-rise Tampa Bay and what will be a better Carolina Panthers team.
I'd like to also mention the Saints. Drew Brees is always a solid quarterback. He's got some good options. They added Adrian Peterson to the backfield, but it's also going to be interesting to see how can he perform. He's getting up there in age. He's been dealing with injuries, so it'll definitely be interesting to see how the Saints can perform in what will be a pretty tough division.
Yeah, James, you mentioned Atlanta, talking about how it's almost the same team, and for me, that makes it tough for me to say that they could repeat as NFC champs. I'm not saying they can't win this division because they certainly can, but it's a young defense for the Atlanta Falcons that played well at times, but also really poorly at times. If you think about that Super Bowl, you kind of get what I'm saying. And they're going to have to grow up fast because Matt Ryan had an MVP kind of year last year, and it almost came out of nowhere, alongside his running back Devonta Freeman 2 years ago. So these are guys that have been really good, but aren't guys that have been relied upon, year after year, and now they are going to be. So if Matt Ryan can replicate last year's performance, he ups himself into an elite quarterback conversation, but I'm just not sold on him right now and the guys around him outside of Julio Jones. We talk about Carolina, it really comes down to the quarterback play. I mentioned Cam Newton. He won an MVP last year, but he had way too many turnovers last season. He's going to have to limit that. Can't try to force the issue. I think guys like Christian McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel, both are rookies. They're just skilled guys that you can just dump the ball off to and get some solid yards, which will help Cam Newton if he's mature enough to see those check down routes. If he can do that, I think Carolina will be all right. That defense struggled at times, but it was a young secondary that was kind of forced into games when they weren't really planned. They weren't really planned to start the season, even seeing much playing time. Now they've kind of had a year to develop and a year under their belt in the NFL. This Carolina team will be better, and it'll be a really fun NFC South race with, you could argue, 4 quarterbacks who could be in the MVP conversation at the end of the season.
And what I'd also like to mention about the Falcons is they lost offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan. He's off to San Francisco as a head coach. So the big question for me for the Falcons is, how are they going to react to that? Is their same mindset, is their same scheme, the same basic plan? How are they going to change? A few questions revolve around that Atlanta offense after the departure of Kyle Shanahan.
I think Dan Quinn, though, is an offensive-minded head coach, and I think he'll take a lot more a lot bigger role in that offense, and not a lot will change because I get this feeling that Quinn and Shanahan were on the same page last year, and Dan Quinn will kind of just keep that same offense and let his offensive coordinator grow into the job over the course of the season. So I don't see much of a change in that, but it will be interesting to watch just to see how this offense adjusts to having a new coordinator, because that is a big deal. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll finally get into some college football. I'm sure you all have been waiting to talk about that. We'll talk about some big games this week and some players to look out for. And then we'll get into the TCU Jackson State game as the Horned Frogs look to start their season off with a win. We do all that right after this.
There's hundreds of fun and simple things you and your family can do to live a healthier lifestyle. Here's 20 of them. Eat less, eat slower, eat smarter, eat your fruits and veggies. Stop eating before you're full. Up your fiber, lower your calories, get off the bus early, do some gardening, do jumping jacks, take the stairs, take one, not two, take on a new sport, take a long walk home, walk instead of drive, bend, stretch, reach for the stars, climb the monkey bars, skip the fudge bars. Search We Can online to find more ways you and your family can get healthy together. A message from the Ad Council, HHS, and NIH's We Can program.
I'm Rachel Ray, and food is not only the way I make my living, it's how I spend time with my family and friends. It's hard to imagine true hunger, but sadly, 1 in 6 Americans don't know where their next meal will come from. They're your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger to find out how you can make a difference. I'm Rachel Ray, and together, we are Feeding America.
A message from Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Friday Night Sports. Guys, let's get into some college football. It's finally week 1. There's a whole bunch of good matchups this weekend. Florida State, number 3, takes on Alabama, top-ranked Alabama. That's the headliner. But I want to start with some players to keep an eye on. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of these players, but I think the college football world needs to know these names. I'm going to start with Darius Geis at LSU. This is probably a household name in the SEC. But not in college football, at least not yet. I think he will be. There are people around Baton Rouge saying that Darius Geis can be better than Fournette. He's a lot more shiftier and runs very angry. If you have a chance, watch the E60 on him. I'm sure you can find it on the ESPN website somewhere. It talks about his upcoming and how rough that was and difficult for him and how that translates into his approach at the running back position. I'm excited to finally see him become the focal point of this LSU offense. The Tigers have never had much of a passing game, and Darius Geis has waited for 2 years behind Leonard Fournette. So I think he's ready for his turn and ready to lead the Tigers into an SEC championship run.
One player I'd like to mention moving over to the Big 12. I'd like to see Shane Buechele perform. He'll be one guy to watch out for. Had a pretty good year starting as a freshman, and just to see how he'll build on last year's performance with Tom Herman at the helm this year.
Yeah, no Deontay Foreman for Texas as he has gone to the NFL draft, so it'll be Shane Buechele's offense, and look to see a lot more of a running and gunning style for the Texas Longhorns this season. The Frogs obviously welcome the Texas Longhorns at the end of the season, so it's just interesting to see what kind of season Shane Buechele has had when Texas comes to town.
And I'll be looking for Jacob Eason at Georgia. Had a solid freshman campaign. Really struggled completion percentage-wise, just over 50% of his passes. Threw for about 3,000 yards, and only threw 8 interceptions, but was extremely lucky to only throw those 8. Georgia fans are expecting a lot this year from the Bulldogs and Kirby Smart, and Smart with a year under his belt. Georgia has been knocking on the door to be that SEC champion. Not sure if they'll trump Alabama this year, but Jacob Eason looks to be a little bit better than last year.
Yeah, again, Georgia's a team in the SEC East. It's a division in that conference that's been down for the past couple of years. Sets up to be the exact same. Florida's going to be starting a true freshman at quarterback over Malik Zaire, the Notre Dame transfer. So obviously some quarterback issues there. South Carolina has been rebuilding for the past couple of years. Tennessee just lost Josh Dobbs, Jalen Hurd, and Alvin Kamara. So they probably won't have that great of a season. So in terms of the SECs, that path from that division to the Georgia Dome, the SEC championship game, looks like Georgia's to take. Jacob Eason will have Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb beside him in that backfield. Those two will split time, and both are really elite ball carriers for Georgia. The defense will always be good, and Kirby Smart seems to be doing good things at Georgia, but I think their success will hinge on the play of like you said, of Jacob Eason.
The Georgia Dome does not exist any longer.
Sorry, the Mercedes-Benz stadium.
Superdome.
No, the Superdome is in Louisiana.
I'm quite sure it's the Superdome. Mitch is on it.
It is the Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
My bad.
Anyway, another guy that I think the college football world should keep an eye on. You probably never heard of him. Is Brandon Wimbush. This is Notre Dame quarterback. He's going to start just a redshirt sophomore. Has yet to see the playing field at all in South Bend in his college career. But with Deshaun Kaiser leaving early for the draft, and surprisingly Malik Zaire, like I said, transferring to Florida, kind of leaves the door wide open for a quarterback in Notre Dame. I think he's the real deal. I had a chance to watch him in the opening 2 years ago, which if you guys aren't familiar with, it's kind of like they invite 10 or 11 quarterbacks to just kind of hang out and put their skills on national television. It's just a bunch of like mini games and stuff like that, and they do scrimmage a little bit, but he looked really good in that, and he's a true dual threat quarterback, which is really fun to watch, at least for me. So I'm excited to see how Brandon Wimbush plays. He'll be on his own pretty much because Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of skilled guys around him. They are in any national championship conversation or like that, like they usually are, I feel like, at the beginning of the season. But Brandon Wimbush would be a guy to keep your eye on. And we'll stay with the quarterback theme with Jarrett Stidham, the Baylor transfer. I think he'll be exciting to watch down in Auburn. He gets thrust right into the starting quarterback role for the Tigers. That's a team that has a lot of talent, has been missing consistent quarterback play, and Jarrett Stidham is kind of the quote-unquote Friday Night Lights guys from Texas. Has an outstanding arm, can make just about any throw. He'll be exciting to watch in these next few months. We'll see how he gets accustomed to life in the SEC. It's a little different than some Big 12 defenses he probably saw at Baylor. A lot better, certainly, but I think Jarrett Stidham has the talent and potential to take Auburn a long way, and even maybe a surprise win over Alabama. Seems like they do that every now and then when they have a great quarterback. Cam Newton, obviously, the last to do so. All right, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll focus some on the TCU Jackson State game. We'll preview that one, and we'll all give you kind of the keys for what we're hoping to see from the Frogs in their season opener in 2017. We do all that right after this.
Fort Worth, this is Max Grizz
and Ryan Lynch with your weekly community calendar. The Wilt Rogers Equestrian Center is hosting the World Championship Appaloosa Show from now until October 29th. For more information and tickets, go to appaloosa.com.
Early voting for the 2016 elections is underway and runs through November 4th. Registered voters can cast their ballots at any early voting locations.
The Kimball Art Museum features a new exhibit, Monet the Early Years. And on October 26th, they'll host a university evening open to area faculty and students. More information can be gotten at kimballart.org.
The Modern Art Museum is presenting the National Theater's live Frankenstein with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller. The movie will be shown on October 26th. For more information, you can visit their website at themodern.org. That's themodern.org. This has been your weekly community calendar update with Max Grizz
and Ryan Lynch.
Welcome back to Friday Night Sports. I'm Ben on alongside me, James Flowers and Mitchell LaFave. Guys, let's spend some time talking about this upcoming game for the Horned Frogs. They open their season against FCS opponent Jackson State tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in AMG Carter Stadium. The Frogs look to bounce back following a difficult season last year, going just 6-7, their first season under 500 since 2013. What are you hoping to see from TCU tomorrow night?
Well, Jackson State could be one of the better teams in the Southwestern Athletic Conference this season, but really they don't pose too big of a threat. And I don't want to sound too cocky or anything like that, and sound like I have high hopes for TCU, which of course I do. But TCU hopes they can win their 16th straight home opener, good for 5th best in college football. I think they will do that. Jackson State does not pose much of a threat. As for TCU, I really want to see Kenny Hill play well. He's got to make good decisions. Last year, his decision-making was extremely questionable. To be fair, like we talked about last week, he had a lot of dropped passes, but not all of those were the receiver's fault. Some of them have to be thrown better. And I've heard good things about Kenny Hill from this summer. I think if he could get off to a very good start tomorrow, on Saturday, this could really play into his favor.
And yeah, like you said, TCU definitely could have scheduled a tougher opponent for their opening game, but no game you should ever take lightly. I mean, South Dakota State, they're much better than Jackson State, but again, like you said, got to see Kenny Hill come out strong. It's really just it's sort of like a coming out party for TCU. Really got to show, hey, we're back, we're better than last year, just to show people what's going on.
Last year was for sure a little too close to comfort in week 1.
Yeah, I think it's almost unfair to compare South Dakota State to Jackson State. I mean, this is a Jackrabbit team that had the leading receiver in the FCS a year ago, and just all in all a good team. I think they either challenged or were a part of the FCS playoffs last year. And on the other hand, Jackson State, a team that went 3-8 last year, they're 0-12 in their history in the FCS playoffs, and they haven't even made it there in the last 20 years. So taking certainly a step down in terms of quality of opponent from last season. That being said, though, the Horned Frogs can't take this team lightly. I think even if they do, they win. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried that this fan base is kind of on the fence about how this season will go, and I think I can speak for all of us in saying that this Jackson State game means a little bit more. If TCU comes out tomorrow night and plays really well and trounces Jackson State by 35, 40 points, your eyes kind of open up, and you kind of start looking up and saying, hey, this could be a decent season for us. We certainly have the talent and the potential to have a good season, but they've got to play well, and it starts tomorrow night. Also TCU sitting 26th in the polls, which is just on the brink of the top 25. And if they come out and lay an egg against Jackson State, an FCS team that's not even a quality FCS team, not to take anything away from what the Tigers have been doing the last couple of years, but if you do that, then you kind of move voters away from moving you into the top 25, which I certainly think the Horned Frogs would like to be in by week 2 when they head to Arkansas.
And the last time TCU played an FCS team out of the Southwestern Athletic Conference was Grambling State in 2012. I don't like to dwell on history. I think sometimes it's a little unnecessary, but they won 56-0. And Grambling State is the only SWAC team in the FCS to have an RPI above 160. They're sitting on 123. So they're, take that for what it is. Of course, that was 2012, but. And I don't want to say they want to treat this as a warm-up, not by any means. It is a very important game. However, I think they need to use this game to get mentally ready for Arkansas. Build ahead of steam, take it to Fayetteville. On the road, it's going to be tough there, no doubt, next week. So be ready to play in front of the Razorback faithful.
And I know earlier in the week there was debate on whether Kyle Hicks would play. I think, Ben, you said Coach Patterson said it would be a game-time decision.
Correct.
So, I mean, I think even if Kyle Hicks does sit out this first game, I don't think it'll be too much of a big deal. I mean, with Sewo Olanolua and Darius Anderson, 2 sophomore running backs who they shined pretty brightly last year when they made their appearances. I think even without Kyle Hicks, TCU should be pretty set.
Yeah, you make a good point, Mitch. Gary Patterson not looking to rest Kyle Hicks, but not certainly saying that he's going to go tomorrow night, because if he's not 100%, which Gary Patterson doesn't think he will be, then there's really no reason to play him and risk him getting an injury or re-aggravating whatever's bothering right now. As of now, it's undisclosed, so I certainly think that leans towards the fact that he will play. But like you said, Mitch, if he can't go, Darius Anderson, Sewo Olanolua. Olanolua is just a physical specimen. This guy's big, strong, fast. He just looks like an absolute monster out there on the field. And Darius Anderson had a career 103 yards on the ground in a win at Texas, which is no slouch of a defense and a stadium to play to have one of your best games as a true freshman last year. So I think this team will be fine, even if Kyle Hicks can't go. That being said, if he can't, like James said, Kenny Hill must play well. I know there's not a lot of pressure in this game, but this offense, like I said last week, will go as Kenny Hill goes. And if you don't have Kyle Hicks beside him and how reliable and just consistently good he's been for the last year and what he expects to be this year, Kenny Hill has got to pick up the slack, and they're going to have to move the ball a lot through the air if Kyle Hicks can't go. So Garrett Patterson's talked about how impressed he's been with Kenny this spring and how mature he seems to be, and how quite a big jump he's made from last season to this season. He needs to show that to us and the rest of the college football world, and he can do that even against an FCS team in Jackson State tomorrow night.
I think for the eyes of Jackson State, this game is very important to them. They have just 4 home games this season, and this is obviously not a home game. But according to the Associated Press, their budget was cut by 8% this past year. They had to cut their golf program, and the university is feeling financially strapped in nearly every area. So while this game is a big payout for them, there are FCS schools that do get big payouts as well. This, for them, could run the table for their athletic department for the year to come. We really don't know. And there are no figures. They're not going to release the figures until next year, even if they do. It's very important they get paid. They do care about the performance, but the money is one of the more important aspects of this game for them right now.
I think you make a good point, James, talking about the business side of kind of this matchup. If anybody out there is wondering if you're wondering why TCU would schedule Jackson State in the opener, it's because this TCU team isn't really sure where they stand. They haven't faced anybody in 6 or 7 months, so it'd be nice to see how they fare against an opposition. But at the same time, you kind of want to schedule someone who you're confident that you'll go out and beat. James said, don't take it like a warm-up game. I think it's like a glorified warm-up game for the Horned Frogs. They've got to go out and take care of business, as we've said. But as for on the flip side, why would Jackson State schedule TCU? You're more than likely going to come in here and get beat by 30, 35 points. And I think James brings that to a good light and saying, this is more than just a football game. That to them, this is about keeping their athletic program alive. So we certainly appreciate Jackson State making the trip to Fort Worth for the season opener against the Horned Frogs, and hopefully TCU plays quite well.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's what we've all been expecting and been anticipating. And for Jackson State, another piece for them, quarterback Brent Lyles has been waiting a long time to lead his team out of the tunnel for the season opener. He's actually been waiting since 2015. He was in a car crash the summer before he was headed off to Jackson State as a freshman, and he broke his left hip joint. He recovered in time to play 6 games for the Tigers in 2016. He threw for about 500 yards and completed 50 passes. So, really good for him, really excited for him. I hope he plays well, and I hope he can soak it all in this weekend.
There is that, but also he is going to have to prove himself against a TCU defense who's going to look to show everyone that they should be a defense to be feared, as a Big 12 defense should be feared. Last year wasn't the best, but this year, especially with tomorrow night, both the offense and defense really got to come out. They're going to be swinging hard.
Yeah, notice both of you guys, and myself included, didn't really jump to the defensive side of things. We focused on Kenny Hill, Kyle Hicks, the offense, scoring points, things like that. This defense, like Mitch said, they've got to play well. But in my opinion, at least, I don't know where you guys stand on it. It doesn't. This isn't a game to to keep a close eye on the defense. I think they'll play well. They'll play about as well as they should. Just do as expected. For me, it's not really a focal point of the defense. They'll be tested next week in Arkansas, and that's when we can kind of get an idea of where this defense stands.
Yeah, you exactly said it. Really, you're putting your defense up to an SEC team. No matter what SEC team it is, it's still going to be a test. So I think next weekend on CBS at 2:30, we're really going to see, hopefully this defense can step up. They've done their homework, and that they can contain Austin Allen at Arkansas.
All right. Once again, Horned Frogs versus Jackson State tomorrow night. It's TCU's season opener in the 2017 season, 7 o'clock, Ammon G. Carter Stadium. Be there, or if you can't, make sure to turn it on KTCU. We'll have the game right here starting at 7 o'clock. And when we come back, we will start our new segment for the next couple of weeks, the college football pick'em. Just pretty basic pick'em. We'll go through 5 games, each give our picks. We'll be sure to track it throughout the course of the season, and we'll have a winner after the 12 weeks. We do all that right after this.
Nothing seems to bring joy quite like the happiness in a child's eye or the smile on their face. Unfortunately, that happiness is not seen in some children, especially those who are the victims of neglect or abuse. And that's where Family Compass comes in. The mission of Family Compass is to build healthy families in a strong Dallas community by preventing child abuse and neglect. They use home mentoring and educational outreach programs to equip and empower parents to raise healthy and productive children. Since being founded in 1992, Family Compass has served nearly 40,000 children and parents by strengthening their families' emotional, economical, physical, and social capacities. To find out more information or ways to donate, visit family.compass.org. And if you suspect any child is being neglected or abused, please call and report it. 1-800-252-5400. That's 1-800-252-5400. This message brought to you by Family Compass of Dallas and your friends here at KTCU.
Welcome back to Friday Night Sports. We're about ready to wrap this show up, but before we do, let's get into our first week of college football pick'em. I've got 5 games in front of me that are, in my opinion, the 5 biggest games of the weekend. Each of us will give our picks and to win and why. So let's start with 11th ranked Michigan, who takes on number 17 Florida in AT&T Stadium right up the road in Dallas. It's a couple teams with quarterback issues. Florida's named their true freshman at their quarterback over Malik Zaire, the Notre Dame transfer. Michigan and Coach Jim Harbaugh have yet to name their starting quarterback. Who do you guys got in the Florida-Michigan game?
Early thought is Florida. Michigan lost too many players from last year's squad to really make them, or to allow them to make another run like they did. Junior Wilton Spate is back, but kind of like what you just said, we don't know if he's actually going to start, and he's the only returning threat on offense. Last year, the offensive line was experienced, but they faltered in losses to Iowa, Ohio State, and Florida State. This year, they are inexperienced, so we don't know what's going to happen with them. On defense, they lose Jabril Peppers, Taco Carlton, and captain Chris Wormley. They've had one returning starter on defense and Mike McCray, so overall they're also inexperienced on that side of the ball. As for the Gators, redshirt freshman Felipe Franks will have many targets to throw to for the Gators. The past 2 seasons, Antonio Callaway has averaged 14.5 yards per catch. Tailback Jordan Scarlett could be the Gators' 4th 1,000-yard rusher in 20 years.
James, before you go further, he's suspended.
Yeah, there's multiple Florida starters suspended.
Callaway suspended? Wow, that's a bummer.
No, Scarlett.
Scarlett is.
Yeah, Jordan Scarlett
is a couple
suspended.
Okay, well, then he could still be the 4th 1,000-yard rusher, but it'd be pretty tough, I assume. How many games is he missing?
Right now it's just 1, so
okay.
Just the Michigan game.
He's going to have to go off. But Florida's defense was ranked 5th in the country last year, and for good reason. They allowed less than 17 points per game and less than 150 passing yards a game. Good for 2nd in the nation and 1st in the SEC. This game could be close, but I'm not sure I really see it being that way. Florida over Michigan in week
1. And early on, I was leaning to Florida. However, Florida has 10 players suspended. Jordan Scarlett and Antonio Callaway are on that list. And so even with a young, inexperienced Michigan team, I just think with the suspensions that the Gators have, I think Michigan is going to pull out the win.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mitch. I said Florida at the beginning of the week as well, but with the suspensions to Callaway and Scarlett, it's almost like a coin flip, in my opinion. It's a couple teams that without, especially Florida, without Scarlett and Callaway, they're probably not a top 25 team, and Michigan, I don't think, is worthy of that number 11 ranking. It's going to be an ugly game, probably about like 7-6, 10-7, something like that. It's going to be really low scoring. So if you like defensive battles, that'll be something to watch. If you're more of an offensive guy, I'd tune into somewhere else. I'm gonna stick with Florida. I still think Austin Appleby's at times is a decent quarterback and can play very well. He'll have some decent targets to throw to, and for me, Wilton Spate, we don't even know if he's even going to start, and the fact that Michigan's yet to name a starter is a little eye-opening, because that means that they don't have complete confidence in either of those quarterbacks yet, or not Austin Appleby's for Florida. Sorry, Felipe Franks. He'll have a chance to kind of take the reins to this offense with no Scarlett, no Callaway. It'll be his. It'll become his offense, and he can do with it as he pleases. And I think that probably plays to the freshman's advantage, just kind of give him the ball and let him do his thing, not try to worry too much about the guys around him and getting those guys involved. He can just go out there and have fun and enjoy himself. That should play in their favor. And I think the Gators squeak by in an ugly, low-scoring affair against the Wolverines. We'll move on. Virginia, number 21, Virginia Tech versus number 22, West Virginia. This game is, of course, on Sunday night at FedEx Field. Guys, who wins in this battle of some lower-ranked teams in the top 25?
Well, Hokies head coach Justin Fuente had a quarterback battle early in the spring, but he decided on Josh Jackson, the redshirt freshman. The losses of Isaiah Ford and Bucky Hodges will slow the offense, but Cam Phillips has returned for his senior year in hopes of eclipsing the 1,000-yard receiving mark, one in which he fell just 17 yards short of last year. On the other side, Will Greer will lead the West Virginia offense, one in which he got to spend a year getting to know very well after having to sit out a year. He'll get Justin Crawford to help him out as the running back rushed for over 1,100 yards, and Karan White is the Mountaineers' deep threat coming off of an injury in 2016. West Virginia is very pass happy, so if Virginia Tech has any hope to beat West Virginia in Landover, defensive coordinator Bud Foster has got to bring his lunchbox defense ready to play.
So wait, hold on, James. I didn't hear a pick.
Yeah, who's your pick?
Sorry, West Virginia.
All right. So for me, West Virginia, their quarterback this year, Will Greer, he's got a lot of hype around him. In his 6 games as a starter in 2015, put up great numbers. And in addition to that, last year, West Virginia was the Big 12's most efficient defense. They have a unique 3-3-5 scheme that they run. You don't see it very often. So with that being said, I think West Virginia is going to take this game in a close game.
Yeah, I'm right with you, Mitch. I think West Virginia takes it. I'm really high on Will Greer. He's 6-0 in his college career. Those 6 games being the first 6 2 years ago for the Florida Gators. He then got suspended for testing positive for PEDs and has now transferred to West Virginia. He'll get tested. Make no mistake about it. This is his first game in a brand new offense, and it's not against any slouch of defense. Bud Foster, historically at Virginia Tech, has had some really outstanding defenses, some really frustrating defenses for quarterbacks. I think Greer does enough, but it's a close game because, like you mentioned, Mitch, that 3-3-5 isn't really set up to stop the run, and Virginia Tech is a a team that likes to keep the ball on the ground a lot and only go through the air as few times as possible, obviously with a brand new quarterback in Josh Jackson. But all in all, Will Greer and that Mountaineer defense, I think they're just too much, and Greer makes it a perfect 7 for 7 in his first start as a Mountaineer. Moving on, South Carolina versus NC State. This is a matchup between two teams that are unranked, between teams that are very evenly matched, and look set for pretty decent seasons. Who are you guys taking in Gamecocks versus the Wolfpack?
Well, Boise State transfer Ryan Finley is coming to NC State for his second year in Raleigh. I think he'll feel much more comfortable than he did last year. Jalen Samuel has 31 touchdowns and 39 starts and will be the offensive threat for NC State. But South Carolina's Sky Moore will be back after missing the 2016 season, making the South Carolina defense a little more threatening. Deebo Samuel is a dynamic receiver for Carolina, and Jake Bentley, with a year under his belt, should seem more comfortable in Will Muschamp's offense. South Carolina beats NC State in Charlotte.
And for me, Gamecocks, they had a rough loss in the Birmingham Bowl last year. But with that, I think they're going to be motivated they were motivated to make everything count over summer. They're going to come out strong, and even with a solid defensive line from the NC State Wolfpack, I think Jake Bentley is going to lead the Gamecocks to a victory.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with both of you guys. I think it's a close game, but I think Jake Bentley's set for a really good season. He was looked really good at times last season for the Gamecocks, as did running back Rigo Dowdle. Doesn't get talked about as much, but Dowdle's a really solid running back, and I think he rushed for over 1,000 yards in the SEC, which is no slouch. South Carolina will be better defensively, obviously, with Sky Moore back, and I think they do just enough to get past the Wolfpack. All right, fourth game real quickly. Let's just go pretty quick on this one. App State, Georgia. The Mountaineers obviously historically knocked off Michigan years ago. Can they do it again in hostile territory this weekend?
I think so. The Mountaineers nearly shocked Tennessee in Knoxville last year, and they'll look to surprise another SEC foe in Georgia. Sunbelt Offensive Player of the Year Jalen Moore rushed for over 1,400 yards and is a very dangerous back. Terrence Upshaw will also return after missing 2016 because of academic issues. The App State defense was also very good last year. They were ranked 17th in the nation according to Athlon Sports. All 4 likely starters in the secondary saw playing time last season, so they have experience. App State forced overtime last season in Knoxville. They'll look to do it again, but this time in Athens, and come out on top.
I think Georgia, they're going to be pretty wary of Appalachian State, seeing how they've faced opponents in the past. But I think Georgia's offense is just going to be too overpowering. Georgia's going to win this one.
Yeah, for me, too much Nick Chubb, too much Sonny Michel, and enough Jacob Eason. Georgia wins pretty handedly. Finally, and certainly not the least, Alabama, Florida State in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, top-ranked tied, third-ranked Knowles. It's the premier matchup of Week 1 there in the new Georgia Dome. Who you guys got?
I'm taking Alabama in this one. They are the favorite, and Florida State just has too many red flags for me, especially on the offensive side of the ball. DeAndre Francois is going to be attacked very early by Alabama. They're going to be coming for him, no doubt. And the big question for them is, can he react? And on the other side of the ball, many returners for Alabama, including both Scarborough and Jalen Hurts. As I said, the Alabama defense is going to confuse DeAndre Francois. I think Alabama takes this one fairly handily.
For me, so in the past 5 seasons, Alabama has opened up the season against a Power 5 team, and while none of them have been as high ranked as Florida State, Alabama still won all 5 of those games by an average of 25 points. I just think Alabama's too good. They're going to beat Florida State.
All right, I'll take the flip side. I'm going with the Knowles. How do you beat Alabama in the past couple of years? You have to have elite quarterback play. Johnny Manziel did it at A&M. Deshaun Watson did it in the national championship game at Clemson last year. Chad Kelly did it at Ole Miss 2 years ago, and Cam Newton back in the day at Auburn. DeAndre Francois, I believe, can be that. He looked really good at times last season and despite playing in front of an offensive line that was atrocious. If that offensive line can protect him, do enough, give him enough time to improvise and use his arm strength and ability to run the ball, I think that dual threat has challenged Alabama defenses in the past. I think it will do it again tomorrow. Never been that high on Jalen Hurts. That offense gets a boost because I think both Scarborough set for a big season, but I don't think they can score enough to match DeAndre Francois. I'm going with the upset, picking the Florida State Seminoles to knock off the top-ranked Tide. That's going to do it for us here on Friday Night Sports. Once again, before we go, if you guys have any name ideas for our show, be sure to let us know. You can find us on Facebook. Friday Night Sports is the name of the page, or on Twitter at Fry Night Sports, FRINIGHTSPORTS. That's going to do it for us. For Ben Otten, for James Flowers and Mitchell Fave, I'm Ben Otten. We will see you guys again next week. Talk about how TCU fared and get you guys set up for the Arkansas game and everything else going on in the sports world.